side is the front, and the front page is the one that says Building Bounce with that big blob on it. So that's going to be the front page. And as we walk through this, I will open us in prayer, and then we'll jump in. Father in heaven, we're grateful for Brown City Camp and the chance that we have to be with friends and be with people that are on a similar journey to us. We just thank you for this time that we have this afternoon. I ask you now to once again give fresh anointing for the task at hand and for the interaction and the learning that we do today, and just dedicate it into your care in Christ's name. Amen. All right, so Building Bounce. You might say, what in the world is Building Bounce? So Building Bounce, first of all, is the name of a book that I am currently writing. It is being written with a therapist from Kansas City named Stephanie Hinman. And Stephanie's background is that her specialty is working with children who have grown up either like in orphanages or foster care, or they've grown up in homes where they weren't getting what they needed. And as a result of that, they don't have the usual kind of bounce that you would expect for a child to have. They don't bounce back well from difficult emotions, from upsetting situations. And you find that that's actually becoming a bigger and bigger problem throughout our society, is that we have a lot of folks who lack the emotional capacity to be able to recover well from upset emotions and upsetting situations. And so sometimes we call this resilience. Sometimes we call it hardiness, or kind of a hardy spirit that says we can recover from the things that go on. Now, I will say that there is no such thing as someone having unlimited bounce, right? Nobody has unlimited capacity. We all reach our limits. The only person who has unlimited emotional capacity is Jesus, which is why he invites us to lean into his care on a regular basis. And so when we're going to start here with our presentation, just defining what is bounce. And on your handout, you'll notice it says, bounce is the ability to bounce back from hard experiences and upsetting situations. Now, because let me give you an example of this. Let's just say that if I feel anxiety, for example, what is the normal amount of time that it should take me to bounce back from something that triggers anxiety inside of me? And what we find is that a well-developed brain that has a high capacity for dealing with this can actually recover from that in 90 seconds or less. Now, we're talking about mild anxiety. So, for example, if I have this sort of anxiety that says, oh no, I'm late getting these things printed off, I don't know if I have enough, that's a mild anxiety, right? A big anxiety would be, I don't know if I have enough money for retirement, I'm about to retire, that could be a big anxiety for somebody. And you look at these things and you're like, well, and that's why I say one of the issues with anxiety, for example, is that it is always anchored in imagination. And it's my ability to imagine a scenario that would be bigger than my ability to bounce back from. And so if I anticipate that I'm going to have to deal with something that I don't think I can bounce back from, that creates anxiety inside of me. And if I get stuck there, instead of recovering in 90 seconds or less, if the anxiety gets too big and it overwhelms my capacity, it triggers the fight, flight, or freeze center of my brain. I start having a physical reaction to my anxiety, and now my hands are shaking, my legs can get lit, my ears get hot, my face is feeling it. I've now got a physical reaction to what I'm going through. And we're like, what do? If you've ever been in that situation, you know that you can't just think your way out of it. You can't just say to yourself, well, God is in control and God is good, because you've already had a physical reaction to the level of anxiety that's taking place. And so it's been situations like that that kind of sometimes wake us up to the reality that maybe I need to build more emotional capacity than I currently have. And also, how do I help somebody else build their emotional capacity? For example, this could be in parenting. How do I, as a parent, help my child grow emotional capacity? As a grandparent, how do I help my grandkids grow emotional capacity? You might be a teacher. You might find yourself in a lot of different settings where this is important. In fact, you see it a lot in coaching. right? There's some coaches who are really good with this. They've got high level of emotional capacity, and there's some who don't. And if I have low level of emotional capacity, what happens is it means it's just really easy for me to get triggered. And what I mean by triggered is some emotion will get so big that I can't get back to joy from it. I can't recover from it. I can't bounce back. And when that happens, I get stuck there. And if I get stuck there for too long of a period of time, it will begin to change my body chemistry. It'll begin to change the way my brain looks at life. It'll begin changing all of these things. And so our goal here is to learn some skills and tools, both to build our own capacity and to build those of people that we work with. So I'm going to start today by giving you some of the overview and the basics of the background behind how it all works. We're also going to be doing some exercises in these sessions so that you get a chance to practice some of these exercises and see what they're like. Let's start with the idea of bounce. If you think about bounce like a ball, you know, the ball bounces, what kind of air would the ball be filled with that allows us bounce in order to bounce back? And the answer is joy. Right? The air that fills the ball that allows it to bounce is joy. So you think about it this way. If I start my day with a lot of joy, that I'm looking forward to the day and I'm looking forward to who I'm going to see and I have anticipation about what I'm going to encounter and I have a high level of joy, and what happens is I can take a lot of hits if I start my day with enough joy. But if I start my day already overwhelmed, let's say I start my day depressed, thinking, man, nobody's going to be happy to see me today. I have nothing to look forward to. I don't know why I'm getting out of bed, right? All of a sudden, you have a low, not very much joy air in your ball, and when you go to bounce it, it just hits flat and doesn't bounce back because there isn't enough joy in that ball to make it bounce back. Same thing if I wake up and I'm already anxious because I'm like, man, I know the stuff I've got to do today. I'm worried about it. I'm not sure how this is going to happen. I'm uncertain about all these things, and I start my day with anxiety, or maybe I start my day with anger. You know, if I'm already stuck in something at the beginning of the day and I haven't grown any joy, that means my capacity to handle the hits that I take throughout the day and bounce back from those hits is directly related to the joy with which I live. I think this is what Jeremiah meant when he said, the joy of the Lord is my strength. Because if you think about that, for the joy of the Lord to be my strength means it is the joy that I have with God kind of fills my ball with enough air that it bounces back. You know, I don't get overwhelmed because you think about all the stuff that Jeremiah went through in his life. I mean, he lived through a horrible time where he was put in prison, he was put into a well, he was betrayed, there was conspiracy against him, a foreign army came and invaded the city of Jerusalem while he lived there. I mean, just horrible stuff. You know, hundreds of thousands of people were killed by this invading army. He saw things you and I probably have never seen. And this is the man who's talking about the joy of the Lord is my strength. So where is that joy coming from? Because it's clearly not coming from his circumstances. And so that idea of where do we find joy, how do we grow joy, and it's interesting to think how much God cares about joy and some of the things that God built into the way he wants us to live life that are designed to help us increase our emotional capacity. And so we're going to walk through some of those. And if you have questions along the way, feel free to raise your hand so make sure I clarify what needs to get clarified. So joy is the air that fills your life with bounce, right? We want to start our day by filling our ball with joy, and we want to end our day by filling our ball with joy. I just wrote a book that came out in the spring. Let me grab it here. My daughter laid out some. It's called The 4 Habits of Joy-Filled Marriages. And I tease my wife with this all the time. Like, aren't you so glad we have a joy-filled marriage whenever we have any tension at all? It's like, but the idea of a joy-filled marriage is not that you don't ever have tension or that you don't ever have problems. It's that you can bounce back from them, right? They don't have the last word in your marriage. You can recover, and you can get back to being happy to be together. And so the goal here is, what are the characteristics of people who are happy to be together? Now, one of the things, this book was co-authored with Chris Corsi, who is the president of Thrive Today, and he wrote the exercises in this book, and I wrote the chapters, basically. And the way that this works was, our goal was to help people get a vision for how to build a rhythm in their marriages that would increase the joy that they experience together. Because in marriage, there's something that's called a joy gap. And a joy gap is literally the amount of time between moments that we share joy together. So, for example, with Brenda and I, you can tell how our marriage is doing by whether or not we are measuring our joy gap in hours or in weeks or months, right? Like, if you are measuring the gap between times we have experienced joy together as a couple in weeks or months, your marriage is in trouble, because at that point, you're probably, already having fantasies about what it would be like to live somewhere else and not have to live with this person. And it's not even that the marriage is bad, there's just no joy. And you think about it, when you got married, none of us got married because we thought we'd be more miserable with this person than without them. We got married because we thought we'd have more joy with this person than without them. And so, but joy is this elusive thing for a lot of us. We're like, well, what does it look like to live with joy? How do you grow joy? What is joy? So maybe I should just start with a definition here. And I'm going to give you a brain science definition of joy, just to anchor this a little more concretely. So your brain, if I could like open my skull, take out my brain would fall into two. Because there's literally a left side and a right side, and they are completely different in the way that they process information. I saw a brain science expert do a TED Talk just recently, where they said that it's like two completely different computer processors. One does it serially or linearly, and that would be the left side of the brain. And the other one has a much more global processing way of looking at things. And so my two sides of the brain are totally different in the way that they look at each other. Now, the right side of my brain is primarily where I do relationships and emotional regulation. The left side of my brain is primarily where I do problem solving. So what happens is God designed me to be a whole brain person, which means he wants my right brain and left brain both to be on and operating at the same time. And so if I have this on-off switch that helps me be relational, we're going to talk more about it tomorrow. But when my brain is fully engaged, then I am at my best, and it is easier for me to bounce back from things. When I'm having trouble bouncing back from upsetting emotions, it usually is because the right side of my brain has shut down. And when the right side of my brain is shut down, I am in total problem-solving mode over here. And the only part of my brain that is functioning is the part of my brain that solves problems. So what this part of the brain does is it looks for problems, and it is constantly analyzing how it's going to solve those problems. And it's also on the left side of the brain that our choices reside. So that's kind of interesting, because we live in a culture that has told us that you just need to choose joy, or you just need to choose to love people, and you need to choose to do this. But actually, choice is a left brain function. And what we're really talking about a lot of these things is a right brain function called attachment. And what we mean by this is that when my right brain and your right brain attach together, there may not be any words spoken, but we feel a connection. Now, when that right brain to right brain connection takes place and we're both happy about it, we call that joy. Okay, so when my right brain has a relational connection to your right brain and we're both happy to see each other, that's joy. So joy always takes place on this right side of your brain. That's where it happens. Your joy doesn't happen on the left side of the brain where you think your way into it and you choose to have it. It happens on the right side of your brain through attachment or through relationship. Now, here's an interesting exercise. How many of you had a best friend in childhood? Okay, you could give a name to this person. You could say, this is the name of my best friend in childhood. How many of you, when you think of that person right now, a memory comes to mind of something that you did together that was fun? Do you have any memory of doing something? Like I had a best friend, and we used to hang out, and he had an above-ground swimming pool, and we had our G.I. Joes and their scuba gear, and we go and play in the, we'd play together, for hours in there, and then we get out, and then we go play home run derby with wiffle ball. And one of the things that's interesting about the brain is remembering joyful relational experiences with people can actually help you get the same rush of hormones and endorphins that you had the first time it happened. which means that the more time that I spend remembering things that were joyful and relationally joyful in my life, the more I'm the more I'm growing my capacity for joy. And so what happens for a lot of us is that because the right side of our brain is kind of shut down and isn't occupied, we spend so much time in our left brain problem solving that when we do think about memories, we tend to think about the bad ones, or we tend to think about, painful things and problems and how we're going to solve those, and we never get around to just letting ourselves kind of settle into happy memories, joyful memories that we had with other people. And the more that we do that, the more that we can build this side of the brain. The other thing that we do is by creating new opportunities. So you go through your day, and you're kind of teaching yourself to look for ways that you can share joy with other people. And anytime that you can share joy with somebody else throughout the day, you get a little boost. It's like, the pump is putting a little bit more air into your balloon. And on the other hand, if you go through your day and you never share joy with anybody, and you don't take any time to remember times of joy, and you don't feel a whole lot of joy in your connection with God, then what happens is that your capacity just gets flatter and flatter and flatter, and there's no bounce, and before you know it, you're just kind of gutting your way through life. In fact, in marriage, when this happens, my right brain shuts down enough in my marriage. What will happen is, if you're doing doing marriage out of the left side of your brain, what means, in my case, would mean that I'm looking at Brenda as if she's a problem to be solved instead of a person to be related to. And when I treat Brenda like she's a problem to be solved, we have a very different relationship than when I treat her like a person to be related to. And so these are all connected to the way this operates. So the definition of joy here is we're going to define joy as a right brain relational experience. So some people ask me, what's the difference between joy and happiness? I would say this: joy is simply relational happiness. All right, it's relational happiness. So like if I buy a new shirt and when I get excited or happy about buying a new shirt, it's not actually the shirt that's making me all happy. It's me anticipating showing it and sharing that with somebody else and saying, look at this new shirt I just bought, right? That's where the joy is coming from. The joy is actually the relational part of this. It's like, a little kid drawing a picture at the kitchen table and they're all happy and having joy. It's not so much the joy in the picture. They're anticipating giving it to mommy and saying, look what I did. And they're already having relational joy as they simply anticipate the relational connection to come. So the way the brain is wired, I am either going to form attachments with people that are anchored in joy, or they will be anchored in fear. And if I have a joy-based relationship with somebody, that means just thinking about being with them starts to lighten my load. I start to get happy just thinking about the next time I'm going to see them. For some of us, that's been since we were dating. Since we felt like, that's the last time I remember really looking forward to seeing someone. But, if you're a grandparent, you think about it this way. When your grandchild walks into the room, do you light up because you chose to? Said, it's my grandson, I probably better be happy. Or was it just an involuntary reaction because you have a joy bond with this child, and when they walk in the room, you light up without making a choice just because it's shared relational happiness. This also affects our relationship to God, because when I have a fear bond to somebody, what it means is I'm not sure they're going to be happy to see me the next time I see them. So I'm fear bonded to somebody. It means that I'm not really looking forward to the next time I see this person because I'm not sure what kind of reaction I'm going to get. And when I'm not sure what kind of reaction I'm going to get, one of the things that I do is that person has now become a problem to be solved and a situation to be managed. And so I go into problem-solving mode, and one of the things I do in problem-solving mode in those kinds of relationships is I'm looking at that person as I think to myself, I need to become somebody else in order to make them happy to see me. Yeah. From them. When I say I'm not sure what kind of reaction I'm going to get, it's like from them. So let's say that I've got a fear bond with my dad. It means when I think about going home for Thanksgiving and I'm going to see my dad, I may be having anxiety instead of joy if I'm fear bonded to him, because I'm not sure what kind of reaction I'm going to get. And so what I'll do is I'll pre-plan how to solve that problem. And one of the ways I try to solve that problem is I think, well, if I put on this mask and try to be this person and act this way, then maybe I'll get a happy reaction out of him. And so that's how, one of the ways I know I'm fear bonded to somebody is I don't believe I can just go be myself and be accepted. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to pretend to be somebody else in order to get acceptance. That means I'm fear bonded. Now, you think about that, we all have probably people like that in our lives. And some of us, literally, our brain has learned to turn every relationship we have into a fear bond. And if our brain has learned to turn every relationship we have into a fear bond, then what happens is it might start off with a joy bond, but pretty gradually my brain will morph it over into a fear bond because it's the only way I actually know how to attach. This has significant implications for our walk with God. Because it is possible to be attached and bonded to God, but not out of joy, so that the joy of the Lord isn't your strength. It's possible to be fear bonded to God. And if you're fear bonded to God, that means that instead of looking forward and anticipating the joy that you're going to feel the next time that you're connected, you're feeling uncertain, like, I don't know if he's going to be happy to see me or not. And if I have that, I'm not sure God's going to be happy to see me or not, that's a fear bond. Now, if I'm fear bonded to God, what that will do is it'll make me tend to wear a mask and try to perform and hope that maybe I can be good enough for God to be happy to see me. Or it's going to make me just want to avoid him altogether. And so it's one of the ways you look, you say, well, do I have a fear bond with God or a joy bond with God? And I got to admit, for most of my life, I've had a fear bond with God, which made me feel like I had to perform for him or I needed to just avoid him. Because there wasn't a whole lot of joy in that relationship. And it's not uncommon in our lives for us to learn how to either form a fear bond or a joy bond with people by how we are raised at home. And so it all connects. So there's a best-selling book on marriage out there. It was done by the Gottman Institute. And the Gottmans talk about master marriages and disaster marriages. Okay, a master marriage, they said, is one that is still strong after 6 years. That's where we are as a culture, okay? A master marriage is still strong after 6 years. A disaster marriage is one that is beginning to fall apart before 6 years. It's either already done or it is beginning to fall apart, but it is going south, not north, in terms of its direction. And they said one of the keys to a master marriage is that these couples learn to share joy together frequently and often. A day doesn't go by without them connecting in joy in some way or another. In disaster marriages, days go by, weeks go by, and it starts to become months and years that go by between times when they truly feel joy in being together. And so what happens is if too much time passes between moments of shared joy, my bond with that person will begin to turn into a fear bond. And the only way to turn that around is to start having more regular moments of sharing joy with the person. We'll begin to turn that around. But you can't just do it like that once. You have to regularly and routinely begin building a pattern of bonding to somebody where there is some joy in that connection. Now, we're going to talk about ways of doing that. But that's all connected to this idea that joy is a relational happiness. Okay? All right, so let's go next because capacity. So the bounce, another way of looking at bounce is you can measure your bounce by how much weight you can handle and still recover. So bounce is related to our emotional capacity. I use the terms interchangeably. How much bounce I have, how much emotional capacity I have. So we have two ways of it. You take a look here, we got a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge, and you think about how much weight can the Golden Gate Bridge handle before it collapses, right? Tons and tons and tons of weight. But what if it was a wooden, Amish wooden bridge going across the creek out in the countryside? Can't handle the same kind of weight, can it, right? No, you try to drive even one semi across that thing and you probably destroyed it. And you look at it the same way, you can tell the difference between people with high emotional capacity and low emotional capacity are kind of like these bridges. There are some people here, and they get hit all the time, but they bounce back. They get hit, but they bounce back. They get hit, but they bounce back. And then there's other people, they get hit once and they go down. And you're like, why? Is it just because they're not tough enough to make the choice, to bounce back? They just need to man up and say, I'm going to bounce back and I'm going to do this. No, it's not just a choice that you make, it's a capacity that has to be built. So you think about this like weightlifting, right? If I were to go into the gym right now, like my son is going to be an offensive lineman at his college football team this fall. So when he goes to the weight room, he warms up with 70-pound free weights to warm up, right? I can hardly lift a 70-pound free weight. It doesn't do any good, for someone to tell me, I want you to go in and do 10 reps with the 70s. Right? I can't choose to do that because I don't have the capacity to do that. In the same way, this bridge doesn't have the capacity to handle semi-trucks going across it. A lot of us, we don't have the ability to bounce back, not simply because we're being stubborn and refusing to bounce back, but because we haven't gone through all of the exercise necessary to build that part of our brain to be able to have the ability to make those decisions and to bounce back that way. Make sense? So capacity is really important. This is why some people go to a counselor and they get some advice and they go off and they make new choices and it turns their whole life around. They never look back. And other people come to get the exact same advice. They try to make choices. They turn around and nothing happens. And you're like, it doesn't get any better. And you're like, why? It's because the first couple had way more capacity to begin with than this couple did. And so it's not just a matter of making better choices, it's a matter of having a plan for how I'm going to grow my capacity so these choices get easier. So if you think about my ability to bounce back from hard things as emotional capacity, then you can begin to see the connection to maturity. So the Bible says that we are not to be infants anymore, tossed around by every doctrine that comes along, but we're to become mature. And in Ephesians, it says that God has given gifts of apostles and teachers and prophets and evangelists to the church. Why? So they can grow maturity, so they can grow in their maturity. And when you look at the description of maturity in the Bible, it's almost always about how you relate to other people. Right? Maturity in the Bible, the highest form of maturity in the Bible is love. Well, what's love? Love is about how I do relationships with other people. The Bible, once it talks about mature people, it says mature people bear one another's burdens. Well, that's relational weight, isn't it? Well, the Bible says that mature people forgive one another when they have been wrong. That's relationally handling weight that has been given to you by other people. And you just go on down the line here of what this looks like, and you begin to understand that we all instinctively do this with our children, and that is that we realize that an infant can't handle the same amount of emotional weight as our toddler, who can't handle the same amount of emotional weight as an elementary school child, who can't handle the same amount as a teenager, and on up the road. But what happens is that if we experience trauma in our lives, our emotional capacity can stop growing. And when that happens, if you have the trauma in your life that causes part of your emotional capacity to stop growing, either in infancy or in early childhood, your body can keep aging, but your emotional capacity is going to stay stuck as that of an infant or a child. And it looks something like this. So the bounce is based on maturity. So infants need somebody to take care of them. And you see down the corner, we got like a shot glass. And the shot glass means that's how much hardship they can handle before they get overwhelmed. Like a little shot glass of hardship, and they're overwhelmed, can't deal with it. That's why it doesn't take much for a baby to start fussing and whining and crying and throwing a fit, because they can only handle that much. Now, what do we do to help infants grow their emotional capacity? We give them lots of smiles, right? Lots of smiles and lots of eye contact and lots of hugs. And when they do get upset, we don't go, well, I'm out of here, no relationship with me until you get yourself settled down. Do we do that with little babies? No, right? We stay with them, we comfort them, we help them recover. And so we're helping them learn, hey, I can experience these great big emotions and someone's still happy to be with me. And that's how their brain begins to learn to bounce back. Now, they get traumatized when they are fussing and whining and crying. I'm like, nope, until you're happy to be with me, I'm out of here. That'll actually traumatize a baby. And what will happen is they won't develop the capacity that they need to. This happens a lot with people who adopt foster kids or adopt kids out of orphanages. where they've gotten their physical needs met, but they haven't gotten their relational needs met, and they adopt these kids thinking, I'm going to pour so much love into their life, it'll just solve everything. I know people get married this way. It's like, I know my wife or my husband has issues, but I'm going to love them so much, it'll fix everything. But what they don't realize is that this person they're adopting or the person they're marrying only has a shot glass worth of capacity to receive your love. And after that, it just sort of flows over and doesn't do anybody any good. And so what's going to happen is it's going to have to be much more systematically grown over time because it just never grew the first time around. So we go to childhood, so that's infancy. In childhood, we go to a little bit bigger cup in the corner here, right? They can handle a little bit more, but you still want to put a lid on it, give them a straw, because they can't handle this, everything. But the goal is, and the little kids have great big huge emotions, don't they? Because one of the things that happens between infancy and childhood is that your brain learns how to experience overwhelmingly huge emotions for the first time. So instead of as an infant you can experience anger, but as a child you can experience rage. Right? That's very different. That's why your adorable little 3-year-old can say, I hate you, I want to kill you, I hate you. You're like, whoa, where did that come from? And it's because for the first time ever, they can feel rage and not just anger. And what they need is somebody to meet them in that and help them know this is how we handle that great big emotion. This is how we do that. It's like what you're going through is rage right now. Let's help you recover, and the goal is to help them get back to joy from that. And so part of a child learning how to take care of themselves, you think about it, the childhood years are all about learning to take care of yourself, right? You learn to potty, you learn to dress yourself, right? You learn to feed yourself. You learn to get yourself to class when school comes around. You learn how to do more and more things for yourself, and your only job is to take care of you. Now, if you want to traumatize a child, give them the job of taking care of the adults in the family. Your job is to be mom. I know you're only 6 years old, little girl, but your job is to be mom and make sure, because mom's, gets drunk a lot and sleeps on the couch, and she doesn't always take care of you and make sure that everybody's getting fed. So I know you're 6, but you do the laundry and you feed the family and you take care of everybody. That will traumatize a child because they're only supposed to have to take care of themselves at that age. They're not supposed to have to take care of everybody. Now, that doesn't mean you can't give them jobs. Say, I need you to do this job, but you give them age-appropriate jobs and sizes that they can handle. You don't give them the weight of the family's going to fall apart if you don't do what you're supposed to do. No child is supposed to have that kind of weight. So we're looking at the idea of, as they learn to take care of themselves, one of the ways they learn to take care of themselves is how to feel big emotions and recover from them. And so we do this by having somebody stay relationally present with us when we're having the big emotion and stay relationally present with us until we recover. So the Gottmans, this wasn't the Gottmans. There's another book called How We Love, and I think the people's names are the Yurkoviches, wrote a book called How We Love, and they said one of the first questions they always ask married couples who come in for counseling is, do you have a memory of being comforted from a great big negative emotion? And they said it's very predictable that the couples that are struggling, one or both of them will not be able to come up with a single memory of being comforted from a great big emotion by their mother or their father. And that to make clear what they're talking about, they put it this way: to be comforted from a great big emotion means that they stayed present with you in your emotion, they made eye contact with you in your emotion, they touched you in a life-giving way, right? Not smacking you, touching you, but they touched you in a life-giving way, and they stayed relationally present with you until you felt like you had recovered from that emotion. Do you have a memory of that? And they said in most of the master marriages that we would call master marriages, people had memories like this, and in most of the ones that were failing, they couldn't think of one. So if I've gotten to be an adult and I have no memories like this, nothing I can do about it now, but I've got to start building some of those and practicing this. Or that part of my brain is just going to stay stuck.
Does that memory need to happen by a certain age?
Yes. That kind of memory needs to happen before puberty. And ideally, normally you should have hundreds of these by the time you're 3 years old, and you should have thousands of them by the time you get to puberty. But if you get, but the earlier you can start doing it, because the other thing that happens at puberty is you actually get a complete brain wipe, which we've all suspected for years, but it's actually true. And what happens is the identity center in your brain gets almost completely erased. And so the identity that they formed by being bonded to you gets wiped out, and they now start forming a new identity based on their relationship to their peers. Which is why if you haven't gotten some of these skills embedded into them by the time they hit puberty, it is way more difficult to get them to learn those skills after puberty. Because they are not bonded to you in the same way that they used to be. And they are not going to develop it the same way. Now, it's not that it's impossible to do these things, but you're going to have to do it more as a almost like a peer-to-peer adult relationship than you are the way it used to be, where you could just tell them what to do. So it all changes there. Am I going to talk more about the parenting adult kids or teen kids, or? I wasn't planning to, because it's not a parenting seminar, but I can address it a little bit. Actually, the next book that Chris and I are writing is going to be a book on parenting, so we're just starting to work on that now. In general, when you're dealing with teens versus children, the childhood years, they're learning to take care of just themselves. As a teenager, they're now an adult. And so now what we do is we have to reason with them and give them consequences, but in a different way. So you don't just say, do this or I'm going to spank you. It's a different, it's more like you try to find consequences that fit the level of what's actually going on here. So you don't just kick them out of the home because they broke curfew, but you try to have corresponding consequences here in the same way that there would be consequences for any adult who treated another adult this way. And so part of being an adult means it's not enough for you to just take care of yourself anymore. You've also got to take care of somebody else too. That's what we can show the next slide. An adult is a person who is not only able to take care of themselves, but is somebody who is able to take care of two people at the same time. So where you find teenagers who aren't able to handle this stuff, it's usually because they are stuck in either child or infancy in their emotional maturity level. And as a result of that, they're still trying to figure out how to take care of themselves, and they don't have the capacity to take care of somebody else at the same time. So one of the things that you do is you have to kind of keep feeding them ways to learn to take care of themselves, and it could be, that's what they do in the military, right? How many times in the military do they get emotional children and infants, and what's the first thing they teach them to do? Make your bed. Right? Get up. When we tell you to get out of bed, you get out of bed, right? And what they do, one of the things the military is really good at is that's what they say. We take boys and we turn them into men, is the idea that they're taking a lot of kids who didn't learn this stuff, and they're now starting to teach them this is how you take care of yourself. And then they put them into groups where they got to accomplish group projects, and they're like, okay, now you got to take care of the person next to you as well as taking care of yourself, because that's what adults do. And so as we're parenting, we kind of keep some of those models in mind. How do we help our kids begin doing group activities as well as just individual activities where they're learning how to take care of more than one person at the same time?
Yeah, they also say in the military that they'll, they see, but they'll try to break you.
Oh, yeah.
The old ways and mold you into what
really. Right, he's saying in the military, they look at you and they say they want to break you of those childish habits, and they want to mold you into a man, right, or into a woman, as the case may be. They want to make you an adult here and break you of living in these childish ways. What tends to happen is that we have a hard time figuring out how to be soft and hard with our kids. And you can make the mistake on either extreme here, right? And that is if all I ever do is coddle my child so that they get whatever they want, and I'm thinking that I'm making them happy, making sure that they get whatever they want so that they always have a choice, and I never just tell them what to do. right? If I'm raising my child, never give them I never just tell them what to do. They've always got a choice. What I'm doing is I'm training someone to be rebellious. That they should, where I'm training them that you should never have to do something that you don't want to do. So to cure that, it's not that you never give them choices about things, but there have to be times along the way where you say, this is simply what we're doing, right? Get on board, let's go. And on the other hand, you can go the other way, where all I do is care about, is essentially it's what I call selfish parenting, and that is, I know what I want to have happen today. You guys just need to get in gear with what I want to do, and as long as I'm happy at the end of the day, I don't really care as long as you didn't get in the way of me having a good day. So selfish parents are kind of like, I don't care what happens with you, just don't mess up my day. And so their whole parenting approach is, just don't bother me. Now, those kind of parents tend to be very strict, or negligent. It's like, I don't care what you do, just don't get in my way. Or they're very strict. This is all that you can do. So what we want, what makes for, you think about it, high-performance parenting is similar to high-performance coaching. And what you want are people who care at the high level and are tough at a high level. And if you are tough at a high level, and you care, the kids will know that you care when you're being tough. They may not like it, but they'll get through it and they'll be better for it. On the other hand, if they know I care but they don't think I'm tough, I'm breeding a spoiled kid. If they know that I'm tough but they don't know that I care, I'm breeding, a rebellious kid. And so you kind of see how that can work out. So in our parenting, what we want to do is we want to grow joy-filled children, but you don't grow joy-filled children by giving those kids whatever they want, by keeping them happy all of the time. You grow joy-filled children by growing kids who are able to experience hard things and bounce back from them, right? They have to be able to experience hard things and bounce back. Now, that doesn't mean I go out of my way to be hard on them, but it means I can't be overprotective either. So my co-author, Stephanie Hinman, she tells the story of being a mom, and she said, as a mom, I wanted to just bubble wrap my kids so that nothing would ever hurt them. And one day, my darling daughter went off to school, and she came back, and she said that, we'll call her Lisa. Lisa was mean to me today, Mom. And she could just feel, her, anger rising up, like, how dare she do that? And you go, what did she do? She says, well, I wanted to play with her, and she just turned her back on me and ran away. And you go, oh, she's getting all upset like this. And she said, God, what am I supposed to do with that? And Stephanie said, the Lord told me very distinctly, he said, your daughter learned compassion today. And he goes, I don't understand. And he said to her, it's not just about bubble wrapping your kids so that nothing ever hurts them. He said it's more like building your child's immune system so that they can be exposed to things without getting infected. You can either become a hypochondriac and try to make sure that your child never touches anything, that has germs in it, or you can boost their immune system so that they can handle a lot of this stuff without getting overwhelmed. Well, building bounce is basically building your emotional immune system. Because to the extent I don't have bounce or emotional capacity in my life, to that extent I have to avoid certain things in life and my world becomes smaller. You think about it, if I have to avoid everything that causes me shame, my world gets a little bit smaller. If I have to avoid everything that causes me sadness, then my world gets a little bit smaller. If I have to avoid everything that makes me angry, then my world gets a little bit smaller, and so on and so forth. So the people who can't bounce back from a whole bunch of emotions often have very small worlds. And what I mean by that is they don't take chances. They just do non-relational things all day long. They don't like being with other people. They don't like, going out and living the adventure of life. And the reason is they're not sure they can actually face what life has to throw at them and bounce back. So in parenting, we want to pass these skills on to our kids so they get used to the idea that we can go out, do hard things, and I'll be happy to be with you. You're not going to be alone in it. We're all going to get through this. It's one of the reasons why camping is such a great, training tool for children, because it teaches them to learn new skills, to try new things, to bond together as a team to get things done. There's all kinds of things that can do this, but that's just one example.
How does all that tie in? I'm thinking, sensing what you're
Yeah, all of this is designed to try to help your kids learn what a healthy reaction is. And so what you're teaching your children at this point as a parent is that they don't have to avoid getting angry. What they need to avoid is letting anger control them. Right? They don't have to avoid getting scared. They want to avoid letting fear control them. And so that means I've got to experience these things, first of all, in small doses that are age appropriate. And so I face my fear at an age appropriate level. So when my daughter's 6, age appropriate fear is, Daddy's in the deep end of the pool, go ahead and jump in. Right? That's an age appropriate fear to overcome. I don't say, here's a pit full of snakes, jump in, right? You know, that's not an age appropriate fear. I don't want to do that to anybody, let alone my kid. So you look at this and you're like, all right, what we're doing here is is that throughout our parenting, we do this all the time, and that is we want our kids to learn how to face various emotional things that are upsetting to them at age-appropriate ways and give them successes, right, that they can build on, and because every time that they have a success of facing a fear or something that makes them angry or something that makes them ashamed, and they have a success at bouncing back from it, their brain is kind of like sees what happened and goes, oh, I can do that. And now the brain goes, okay, the next time that happens, I'm going to do it the same way. And so the more often that they face these emotions and they bounce back, what happens is the brain learns, oh, that's how it's like us to handle that emotion. All right, and your brain literally starts forming pathways that say, well, when I feel this emotion, this is what I do, and then I can return to joy. And it becomes a habit. And that's why there's some of you sitting out there almost don't even understand what I'm talking about, because you're so good at bouncing back from things. You're like, what's the big deal? But it's because your brain has been doing this for years, and it's hard to understand people who don't have the capacity. And so for people who have a high capacity for these things, it's easy to look at somebody who doesn't have it and go, what is wrong with them? In fact, one of the things that people with high emotional capacity sometimes have to struggle with is the feeling of disgust for people who don't have it. It's like, really? Yeah, that's what you're doing? And so disgust becomes one of the emotions I have to learn how to return to joy from, right? Because I don't want to live out of my disgust, but it kind of happens along the way. All right, so that's page 1. All right. Very good. You can flip to the back side of your handouts, page 2, and we'll get into some of our Is this over at 3:30? I got 10 minutes. I haven't had you do any exercises yet. I'm sorry. We'll do exercises tomorrow. Okay. All right, I'm going to walk you through what these exercises are about on page 2 here. That is, there are 2 things that you need in order to have a lot of bounce. All right, if you want a high emotional capacity in your life, the 2 things you need are a big joy bucket and well-worn paths back to joy from what we call the sad emotions. Now, the sad emotions represent what we call the big 6 negative emotions, and that's sadness, anxiety, despair, shame, anger, and disgust. And a big bucket refers to the joy center. Remember I said joy is a right brain relational experience? Well, it's even more specific than that. The joy center of your brain is on the right half of your brain at the very front of it. So it would locate it right behind your right eye. Are you out? Here, you can have this. I have one more here. Yep. My joy center is right behind my right eye. Now, here's what's fascinating about this. As an infant, you don't have a joy center. When you are born, your joy center does not exist. That's why little infants, when they're smiling at you, just have gas, right? That is not right? That's not hey, I'm happy to see you. I know that you're my mother and I love you. That's not what's happening there. But by the time they get to about 6 months of age, the main thing that the baby is doing all day long is growing that joy center. And that means from about 6 months of age to 18 months of age, the primary thing that's supposed to be happening is that baby is supposed to be interacting with people who are happy to be with them. and they're getting lots of smiles, and whenever they have an upset emotion, someone is comforting them and helping them get back to joy. They're not getting stuck in those emotions. And you think about what happens around 18 months of age, you go into what we call the terrible twos, right? And the reason it's called the terrible twos is because that's when my brain for the first time can feel extreme emotion. That's where I start going from anger to rage, when I start going from fear to terror, when I start, going to really big emotions. So in this way, because that's what's going on, we need to have, what can happen is that this part of my brain can go from being completely undeveloped to becoming up to a third of the right side of my brain. So when I say a big joy bucket, I mean that the joy center in my brain literally begins to grow until it can become a quarter of my brain, a third of my brain. And if I get a really big joy bucket, like my joy center gets really big, guess what? I tend to start my day with anticipation and excitement and joy. I tend to wake up with energy and joy, ready to look forward to things. And it takes a lot to get me down. I can take a lot of hits without, falling apart because that joy center is just so big. On the other hand, again, you go back to like the orphanage or foster home sequence where these kids aren't getting that. This part of their brain is literally tiny. And because it's tiny, they physically cannot experience joy. They certainly can't experience it for very long. It may last a couple of seconds and then they're done. And so you work with that. You're like, okay, let's give you a couple of seconds of joy, let you recover. Okay, let's try a couple more seconds. Okay, let's let you recover. And you think about it, that's what babies do. You know how babies look at you, and they get all excited. They'll literally start bouncing, and then they look away. It's because they got worn out from all of the joy. But you wait like 10 seconds, and they're back. Like, you're again. Hey, you still happy? Yeah, let's build some joy. Yay, I'm excited. Look away, right? And what's happening here is just like weightlifting. With weightlifting, when I'm lifting weights, I'm not actually growing my muscles. I'm damaging my muscles. So I have to rest in between, and it's during the rest time that my body is rebuilding the muscle that it grows. So in the same way, if I want to get to the point where I can work out with 70-pound dumbbells, I've got to work my way up there by being intentional about working out that muscle group and then resting it. Work out that muscle group and then resting it. Well, that pattern of work it out and then rest it is the same way that we grow joy. And that is, you can't just be up all of the time. But you've got to know that there are moments when you're going to be happy to be with people and there's going to be joy present that you can build on, and then you've got to know there's times of quiet that are coming. And when you have this rhythm between times of happiness and times of recovery, it's like a joy workout for your brain, and that's how this part of the brain grows. With high joy experiences and then times of rest, and high joy experiences and then times of rest. And as we do this, this part of my brain can grow. And the good news is here, that part of your brain has the capacity to grow for as long as you live. So it doesn't matter how old you are, you can be past puberty and you can still grow that part of your brain. Now, one of the simplest, fastest ways to grow this part of your brain is through the practice of appreciation, which may have something to do with why the Bible tells us so often to be grateful. And to have praise for God, because praise and gratitude are both related to appreciation, and they do a couple of things. Appreciation grows this joy center in my brain, but it also grows my capacity to bond in joy with people instead of bonding in fear with people. So if I'm constantly practicing praise and appreciation with God, I begin to build a joy bond with God. If all I ever do with God is talk about my problems or avoid Him, you want a balance here, right? I want praise and appreciation, and knowing then, okay, we can relationally talk about my problems too, and then we come back to praise and appreciation, and I'm now building a nice rhythm in my walk with God. And I got to do the same thing with my kids. I'm not always just showering them with praise and appreciation. If all you ever do is shower your child with praise and appreciation, you are raising a narcissist. Seriously. It's like they have to earn some of that praise and appreciation along the way. And there have to be some things that they do or they don't, that they sometimes get in trouble for. And so you learn that that you're helping them grow their capacity to handle all of these things. So appreciation is a big one. I'll go through more of this tomorrow. Then quieting is the second thing. We said that you need a workout and then you need rest. Let me walk through some of these quieting things with you. Let me give you 3 ways of practicing quieting. Now, quieting, I would tell you, is the number one determiner of long-term emotional health. Right? And from a scientific perspective, if you're looking for what is the number one determiner of saying that I will have long-term emotional health, it is my ability to quiet my mind. If I can't quiet my mind, it means it's racing all of the time. I'm going to tend to be unstable. So I need to learn how to quiet. So let me give you 3 quieting tools here that you can practice. Let's see the order I've got them. I'll call squeeze and release. And squeeze and release, you can try it this way. You know, if you kind of shake out your arms and squeeze your hands tight as you can, hold it for 4, 3, 2, 1, and then shake it out. Then take a deep breath. Does your body just feel a little different? Right? So you can do that with your legs and your feet. Just squeeze your legs and your feet. 4, 3, 2, 1, and then just kind of shake them out and bounce it a little bit. And you can begin to feel what happens is you can change your body chemistry a little bit. Because when you're feeling a big emotion, sometimes your body chemistry will get stuck in that emotion. You got to have ways of recovering it. Also, have you ever noticed that if you're feeling a big emotion and somebody says, just relax, chill out, that doesn't work very well? Because the way that we actually calm ourselves from upsetting emotion is we have to temporarily increase that emotion first and then quiet it. So the idea behind squeeze and then release is a little bit like if I'm angry, it'd be like taking a towel and going, oh, and increasing that anger for a minute and go, okay, now shake it out, say it. And I can actually quiet myself better by increasing it a little bit first and then calming or quieting that down a little bit. So when you're teaching your little kid, like you feel really mad right now, don't you? Right? That's one of the things you can do. It's like, let's do this. When you feel mad, you know what the Hebrew word for angry is? Nose. Right? The Hebrew word for angry is nose, which if you think about it, it's like your nostrils are flaring. And so you can do this with your little kid, like when they're feeling mad and you want to help them, you go, oh, let's get really mad, shall we? Make a big nose, squeeze your hands. And then, okay, now we shake. And notice how fast you can help your kid get back to joy from that, right? Because you just met them in their big upset emotion, and then you helped them kind of calm down from it, and now you can talk about it. What we usually do is we just try to talk them out of their emotion. And it's much more effective to kind of help them feel the emotion, calm from it a little bit, and then talk to them than the other way around. All right.
I was just going to say, the beauty of what you just said is that we're teaching ourselves and others to feel,
yes.
to identify with that instead of just a word. Actually,
Exactly. This is one of the things that she says is beautiful about this is you're teaching people to actually feel what they're feeling and identify what they're feeling. What I'm explaining is a physical form of validation. So let's take something like anxiety. What is an infant's response to anxiety when they feel fear? Right? It's involuntary. Their hands go up. So in the same way, you can try this. If you're starting to feel a little bit of anxiety, your breathing tends to get shallow, you tend to get tense, just find a quiet, secret place and do this. Go, right? Just temporarily increase the thing, and then blow out. Let yourself relax, and maybe say the words as you do this. When I'm afraid, I will trust in you, O Lord. We call that shalom your body. Jim Wilder came up with that exercise. Said you may not want to do it in public, but you can find a private place to do it. And what happens is you do this stuff like 3 times, and notice how different you feel after you've done it 3 times. So you go, when I'm afraid, I will trust in you, O God. Breathing out. Do it again. Right? And what's happened is you're training your body that I can recover from this. It doesn't have to be the end of everything. So the squeeze and release, the shalom your body, and the other one, they teach the Navy SEALs this, and it's called square breathing or box breathing. And we can try it real quick, and that is you inhale for a 4 count, hold for a 4 count, release for a 4 count, hold for a 4 count, breathe in, hold, blow out, hold, and you just go around the box, right? Breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold, breathe in, hold, breathe out. And just do it for 4 counts, 3 or 4 times. And what I found is that if you do this kind of stuff or this kind of stuff or whatever, and then you do the breathing afterwards, it can really help people calm down. I found myself in a situation not long ago where a guy was having a panic attack in a parking lot, and somebody said, hey, can you come and help him? And the first thing I did was I just sat next to him, and I said, is it okay if I touch you? And he nodded his head, and I just put my hand on his arm, and we just sat there for like a full minute. That was all I tried to do. And I said, can you look at me? And he kind of did, and he kind of didn't. And I was like, all right, can you breathe? Let's try doing your breathing a little bit deeper now. I said, what I want you to do is hold your breath for 4 seconds and then blow it back out. Can you do that? And so I kept holding his arm the whole time. And he breathed in for 4 seconds and then blew it out, and then breathed it in for 4 seconds and blew it out. And then I said, now can you look at me? He said, okay, start making eye contact. And I said, can you talk yet? And he's like, no. I'm like, all right. What could you do? And he picks up his phone and he texts me. This is what's going on. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that would overwhelm somebody. But the idea is I'm remaining present with him, trying to help him get his body under control before we start talking about things. And then by the time he got his body under control, and then he could, he started by texting me, and then I said, so is this, did this happen a lot? He's like, yeah. I said, oh, no wonder that. Now I'm validating the emotion. Well, that would definitely make somebody feel panic. That would definitely make them feel this way. We're validating the emotion, connecting. And then I said, can you do the breathing again? And he'd breathe some more. I'm like, now can you, as soon as you find your words, let's talk about this. And and finally we got to the point where he could talk. And then we got to the point where we could pray. And then he got to the point where I said, okay, do you feel a little bit more like yourself now? He goes, yeah. Okay, do you think you can take it from here? He goes, yeah, I can take it from here. And so we just kind of walked him back down to this is what you do. The whole thing took about 6-7 minutes. But the idea here was you got to help somebody get their body under control, then you got to help them get before you worry about trying to get their thinking and their words under control. He's frozen, right? He's frozen. He's literally shaking, right? Literally shaking. So we're just like, I'm here. I've kept my hand here the whole time. I'm here. At the end of it, I was like, okay. I said a few different times, I'm here for you. We're no rush. Take your time. And so when that happens, what you're doing is you're teaching him that his brain is learning it is possible to quiet from this. This doesn't have to be the end of the world. What was interesting was his girlfriend was there watching all of this. And so now she's like, okay, I think I see how to do this now. And so now there was somebody else who could, help if something like this happened again. But this is kind of the idea when we talk about quieting, is if I can't quiet from upset emotions, the only other option is to get stuck there. And if I'm stuck there, it takes over my life and it becomes this monster I don't know how to slay. And then I start feeling shame. Like, what's wrong with me that I live with so much depression? What's wrong with me that I live with so much fear? What's wrong with me that I have so much? And it's not that there's anything wrong with me. It's that there are things in my life that are undeveloped that need some focused attention to begin developing them. And it isn't going to be just make a choice and this will all go away. It means I'm going to have to day after day after day make choices to begin doing the things that it takes to grow this capacity and build it out. So we're going to talk about building bounce this week. And just to give you the idea, there are 3, I call it the ABCs of building bounce. You build bounce with ABC. A is appreciation. So tomorrow we'll start with appreciation and how that practice can help. Second, B is beliefs. And that is, what is the story that I'm telling myself over and over again? Because the story, if I tell myself a story of hopelessness over and over again, I'm going to feel depressed. If I tell myself a story of, impending doom over and over again, I'm going to have fear and anxiety. So I got to get my beliefs under control. And then C is connections. I need to have a joy-bonded connection with God, and I need to develop joy-bonded connections with other people. If I only have a fear-bonded connection with God and a fear-bonded connection with other people, that's not going to help. I've got to learn how do you grow joy bonds? And just a little spoiler on this, you don't grow joy bonds by finding the right person to take care of you. You form joy bonds by learning the skills of forming joy with people. Have you ever noticed there's some people, they don't see any problem with this, they just collect friends wherever they go. And they don't go saying, I sure hope there's a group of people here at camp who will accept me. They go in thinking, because they know they've got the skills to meet people and form connections and form relationships and create belonging wherever they go. So our goal isn't just let's help you find a safe group to be a part of, but let's help you learn the skills that go into building safe groups everywhere you go. And that's ultimately what we're after here. Okay, so that wraps up for today. Tomorrow we're going to dive in to the appreciation, the ABCs of this. We'll start unpacking them a little bit more tomorrow. All right, God bless, and we'll see you on Tuesday.